Welcome to the Scramble. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tommy Laren. Today we'll take a look at the Ukraine package on its way to the President's desk for approval. Next we'll discuss climate change as it relates to new emissions regulations. And finally we'll touch on a new minor program set to hit the UNLV course catalog in 2015. War game gurus and Xbox enthusiasts may want to pay attention to this one. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to introduce today's panel. First we have Ryan Hamilton, a graduate student in Journalism and Media Studies. Next, we have David Sarabian, a senior in political science and a former State Department intern. We welcome Alvin Loy, a senior in journalism and media studies. And we move to Alex Velto, a junior in political science with a minor in Brookings Public Policy. Thanks you guys for being here, and let's get started with our very first topic. While Ukraine has dominated the news these past weeks, the situation is continually evolving, and the United States is responding this week. The assistance package to Ukraine provides loan guarantees to Kiev and places a variety of sanctions against top Russian officials and others connected with the Crimean invasion. The package passed the House with ease on Tuesday, and the path of the White House was made much easier after Senate Democrats dropped a controversial provision encouraged by the Obama administration that included reforms to the International Monetary Fund. The package includes a $10 million initiative that is designed to counter Russian propaganda in eastern Ukraine, Crimea, and Moldova via outlets such as the Voice of America. Other aid proposals such as natural gas exports and non-lethal aid have not made it on the agenda as of yet. So I asked you guys, what do you guys think of this new package? Is it enough? And should the IMF reforms have made it into the final package? David, let's start with you on this one.
Well, I think that it's good that we're actually putting some money towards Ukraine because the Russians are very renowned for their what they call active measures, which is they're very good at the core of just pure black propaganda and being able to try and convince other people. During the 80s, I believe 70s, 80s, they had Operation Infection, which in the United States was propaganda to make it seem like HIV was created in Fort Detrick, Maryland. And so the Russians, for years, have a very good history of propaganda, of knowing how to do it and what to do it. And it's good that we're actually, in a way, striking back to make sure that their propaganda, which they are some of the best in the world at, starts to get pushed onto the periphery or at least reduced as far as its impact is concerned.
Okay. And I'd like to address you, Alex. What do you think about propaganda as well as the IMF? Do you think that that should have remained in the final package?
Well, I definitely think the IMF reform should have contained itself in the final package. The IMF bill made it so other countries, the lesser developed nations, had a larger say in the voting of the IMF, but it also made it so they were more inclined to be supportive of the IMF. As it is now, the U.S. is the largest funder, has veto rights. That would still have occurred after the IMF reform, but other nations would have had much larger incentive to put money into the IMF, because as it is now, there's no burden sharing really going on. So it gives it a lot less credibility in the eyes of the rest of the world. It makes it so developing nations that don't necessarily need the IMF, who are still going to give money towards countries in need, will not go through the process, which advantages the U.S.
Okay, Ryan, what do we think about this?
I mean, I think that I don't see why this has to be the bill that they're putting the reforms in, right? I don't necessarily disagree with the reforms, but I think they should be considered on their own merit.
Okay.
There's no need to politicize this bill with additional reforms. Ukraine needs the aid. They probably need it yesterday. The Democrats are just trying to put Republicans in a position so that they have to vote for the reforms because they don't want them considered on their own merits. And I don't think it's fair to play politics like that. You should have two bills. One is a Ukrainian aid package, and one is an IMF reform bill, and then they should both move as independent bodies through the legislature.
The problem is that bill won't pass. Like, this has been attached to multiple pieces of legislation in the past year or so. The big issue is that we've already agreed to it because it makes sense, but Tea Partiers in the U.S. don't seem to understand that it's actually beneficial for the U.S. and beneficial for the sustainment of the IMF. If it had been attached separately, no one's going to give Obama the win on something he's already negotiated, even though it's beneficial for U.S. credibility.
That's a problem for the bill. I'm not going to subvert the legislative process.
It's politicized.
It's not politicized,
it's already
right?
politicized.
The bill, the IMF bill, is politicized. The Ukraine aid package, not politicized. By adding one to the other, you politicize both.
Why is the bill bad?
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it should be considered on its own merits, right?
On its own merits.
And if it will fail on its own merits, I'm not speaking to the credential of the bill or the merit of the bill. I'm speaking to the political process that Democrats are using to pigeonhole Republicans into making so that they can get on the news in the evening and say the Republicans are delaying the aid to the Ukraine. That's not factually speaking true. Right? The Democrats are combining the two, conflating them, and then saying the Republicans aren't voting to aid Ukraine, when in fact they would vote to aid Ukraine if they were given that opportunity, absent other reforms to the IMF, which I'm not necessarily against.
Clearly, the Democrats are not politicizing it because they removed it from the bill. So that wasn't the main push, was to politicize and blame Republicans. But fair.
So I want to ask you guys, what do we think of this bill? Do you think these aid measures are enough? Alvin, I want to ask you, do you think that this bill is a good bill, giving assistance to Ukraine?
It's a good start, but you have to wonder, is it enough? Like we talk about the aid with them. Yes, it's good, but like you said, Russia's so prepared for this. Like they're like the master propaganda. I wonder is enough. I kind of also wonder if this is too late for this kind of action. Russia pretty much owns Crimea right now. They already annexed them. They already have the vote for them. So is it like a containment measure? It might work, but it just feels like it's not enough. I feel like with Russia is having so well prepared, positioned themselves, and there's really nothing the U.S. can really do. Threaten them with sanctions. Russia has another partner. They have China. They need to go get something. So really, the U.S. is really kind of stuck in a hard rock and a like this really can't place. Yeah, they just really can't really do anything right now at this moment.
David, I want to ask you, what do you think about that? Do you think we should consider other options for aid as well as our own propaganda? Should we be considering, as I mentioned, natural gas exports, non-lethal aid? What do you think about that?
Well, that's just the congressional aspect. Of course, in the kind of shadowy side, there's probably already covert action officers on the ground from CIA. And how much fade from the president's discretionary budget that's going to go in there is, you know, obviously up to the president's discretion. But this is obviously a very important issue. From people that I know back east, this is very important. This is an all hands on deck thing. This is one of those people that work at these agencies. They come in on the weekends and they're getting there at 6 a.m. and they're leaving at 8 p.m. at night. So this is an all hands on deck that even if people don't think the government is really working on, they are. It's just not a lot of people are seeing it. And this is just the public side of it. Okay. This isn't, you know, the shadowy side of it that a lot of stuff does go on. And keep in mind, people are saying, oh, this is a new Cold War with the U.S. and Russia. Cold War hasn't ended. Oleg Kalugin, he was in charge of the illegals, the non-official cover agents, around the 70s, during the height of the Cold War. The most that the Russians had in the U.S. was 5 at the time. When those 11 Russian illegals were sent back, including the red-headed one that Joe Biden seems to like, there were 11 of them. There was more than double than at the height of the Cold War. People are like, oh, the Cold War is over. The spying's increased since the end of the Cold War. We're certainly not in some technological squabble because the Russians are electronically backward, but that doesn't mean they still can't do some damage. And Putin just wants his toys back, at least the countries that he does want. He wants Crimea. He went for Georgia in, what, 2006? You know, it reminds me of Hitler before World War II. He's just going to keep grabbing the little bits of countries that he wants. And the U.S. is going to have to counter it, but in an essence of the Cold War, there's a lot more shadowy gaming that has to go on and has to be involved, that the U.S. is going to have to step up their game, and whoever succeeds Obama is going to have to continue with, because Russia's not going away. Okay. Putin doesn't.
Alex, I want to ask you about that. What do you think the role the United States should play, especially in relation to the EU?
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's as bad as the Cold War was, because I don't think we're not in a bipolar system anymore, because you have countries like China, India, Brazil.
Spying is worse.
I mean, yeah, but spying only matters as much as your ability to use that spying intel, and I don't think that Russia or any other country for that matter has the ability to power project such as the United States does. It's not nearly as close to being bipolar as it was during the Cold War. As far as what the U.S. should do, what you mentioned earlier, natural gas exports, I think, are the most important thing that we can do, because the only way you can get really the EU to ever agree to any seriously harsh sanctions is to make it so they're no longer dependent on Russia for natural gas.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why Russia was so aggressive in Ukraine, is because they wanted to be able to export natural gas. So if we were to satisfy the EU's energy demands with exports, they'd be more likely to support issues such as getting Ukraine integrated into NATO, being more powerful with NATO in general. And I think that would be more effective at combating Russia, as opposed to just like trying to control the spin game on the ground. Because while that is important, it really just matters whether or not, you know, other countries are on board with us and we can prevent Russia from doing the power grabbing that you were talking about.
Ryan, I want to give you the final word on that before we move to climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that we need to also encourage the EU to become, we need to encourage them to become energy independent, but that's not the United States' burden, right? Like, the EU should realize that they're dealing with an irrational actor who's supplying X percentage of their natural gas and then want to move away from that. I just think the EU needs to take a greater responsibility in that part of the world. I mean, that's kind of why they were designed.
Okay.
So, that's what they should be doing.
All right, well, there's far too much agreement on the panel, so now let's move to climate change and we'll really get the debate going. Well, this unusually harsh winter may leave some wondering if climate change is a forgotten concept. Well, despite this cold snap, scientists have reached consensus climate change is occurring. What are we going to do about it is the controversial question we shall address here today. In 2007, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the Clean Air Act gives the EPA the authority to regulate greenhouse gas emitted from vehicles. The current case broadens the scope. Does the EPA have the ability, under the Clean Air Act, to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from stationary sources, such as factories and power plants? The court remains pretty evenly divided on the issue. So my question for the panelists are, 1, should the EPA be granted authority? And 2, how likely is it that justices will vote in favor of this interpretation? So Alex, I know that you're very passionate about this. Let's start with you.
Well, climate change is clearly an issue, so we should just get that off the table
We've all
here.
come to a consensus on that.
Yeah,
I did concede to that.
thing.
Okay.
Okay. As far as the current case, I don't necessarily think this court case that's happening is as big of an issue as a lot of people make it out to be. It's only in regards to small stationary pollution, which, to some extent, as was referenced in to some extent as was referenced during the cross-examination at the Supreme Court, could that mean if I'm having a large party, would we have to request a permit, which was one of the questions I believe Scalia asked. Okay. That's why this is not as relevant, because a lot of more of the polluters, say cars, like power plants, coal plants, those are what really produce the ultimate amount of emissions, which this case will have virtually no effect on. So the strength of the EPA to regulate emissions will still be in effect regardless of this case. To the question of whether or not they should have the ability, I think, of course, like global climate change is something that's going to be horrendous in the way it affects the United States. Florida is going to go underwater, 20 feet level of sea level rises. It's going to be terrible, and it's going to hurt the developing South, or the global South, much worse than it will hurt the affluent North. So I think there's very important for us to continue regulating emissions. I don't necessarily think this court case will have much of an effect. As far as it goes, though, I think Kennedy's going to rule against this, and the EPA is not going to have the authority to regulate such low-level emissions.
All right, is Florida going underwater, Ryan? I want to hear from you
that's
first.
So ridiculous. It's just preposterous. I mean, even if we were to take the most conservative projections by the UN panel on climate change, we're already past the point where regulation can do anything. So we might as well just charge on ahead, right? There's nothing that we could do now to change the projections that the UN has issued out there. But I mean, I'm sympathetic to those who challenge global warming. And that's because the issue has been politicized, right? If I'm a weatherman and this actually happened at the Weather Channel, and I'm a meteorologist and I say, I don't think the evidence for global warming is substantiated, I lose my job. Of course there's going to be a chilling effect on scientists who want to challenge global warming. The moment you say, wait a second, I don't necessarily know that this is a man-made phenomenon, you are isolated. They have evidence that people have concluded to keep people who have legitimate academic evidence out of journals so that they can't say that they're peer-reviewed. I mean, it is a conspiracy, and not only that, it's a proven conspiracy, a political one, to keep people who would question the findings of the UN's climate change panel out of academic journals and out of the public eye. I mean, we have emails. It's not even, that is less of a debate than whether climate change is man-made at this point. So I am sympathetic to those who would say that it's not a settled argument. I mean, I don't know the facts. I'm not a scientist, right? But what I do know is that the process by which they arrived at this conclusion has been anything but legitimate.
Can I ask you a question really quick? You said there's evidence
Yeah.
that they say that they have the chilling effect. Can you give me some examples of
Absolutely. So, I don't know, 2 years ago, there was a hacker who went into the University of East Anglia. It's one of 3 data centers that supplies the UN's climate change panel. And they hacked their emails. And they published them across the internet. And in there was some, talk about how they were fudging numbers. But that wasn't as disconcerting as the fact that they were nominating each other for awards. Right? They were colluding to nominate each other so they could say, oh, this award-winning scientist. They were colluding against what they call client deniers, skeptics of climate change, and saying, don't allow him to get published in this journal. Who do you know at this journal who will reject this publication that's coming out, right? Like, it's clear as day conspiracy. The emails are out there. They're there for anyone to read.
That's just like not, the emails exist, you're correct. But those people, there's no chilling effect. Why are the IDSOs at ASU able to produce academic papers in peer-reviewed journals that say CO2 would be great for agriculture? Why is the Bennett's at NYU able to constantly produce academic journals that say that climate change is non-existent? The chilling effect doesn't exist. People might be deterred from certain journals which exist to prove climate change, but they still have the ability to produce those journals, and you compare the data. The second argument is that you claim that it was unable to reverse the trend. Positive feedbacks can be re-kickstarted, That's the reason why global warming is that bad, is because it causes positive feedbacks, which just increase climate change. But you can cause more you can increase the albedo. You can do a lot of other issues like increasing reforesting could allow for us to take out some of the CO2, decrease the warming effect. You can reverse the trend, but you need to start. Saying we've already passed the point of no return is like not
I'm saying that's what the data indicates. But the second thing is I told you no more than 5 minutes ago that I was a climate change skeptic, and you laughed at me. To think that there's no chilling effect is preposterous. Anybody who goes on or in public and says, I don't believe in climate change, they're laughed out of the room. They lose their job. They're denied from academic publications 9 times out of 10,
News.
Right? I mean, we're talking about serious academic discussions.
You're right. You're right. Credible news organizations.
All right, we're not gonna discuss the merits of Fox News, but thank you, Alex. Ryan, continue.
My point is that there is a serious problem with the process to which this alleged consensus has been arrived at,
Okay.
which and that's why I think that there needs to be more debate with what's going on.
All right, David, what do you say? Weigh in between these two here.
Well,
Climate change.
I
Let's
want to get back
discuss.
to the issue, which was the Supreme Court case, which is that, God forbid we reduce pollution. I'm from back east where there's very bad pollution rates and it affects public health. And so that's the aspect that I'm looking at it. Let's toss global climate change aside. This is a public health issue when it comes to the EPA. And so we should focus on that because, my sister has asthma. A lot of people I know have asthma from back east, and they directly linked it to pollution. And so I would hope that the EPA gets the authority for this to be expanded, because I would be concerned about my children's health and all of our potential children's health and whether they'll have health issues that will cost them money down the road and will negatively affect their lives so they can't play sports or do anything that little kids want to do. Because I've been back east, and it's one of the most disheartening things to see during halftime a bunch of kids on their nebulizers or inhalers because of pollution.
Okay.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. Things like sulfur dioxide, a bunch of other chemicals, aerosols, all contribute to things like acid rain. Those are all terrible. So I think it's important for us to regulate coal plants, for us to regulate dirty emitters.
There's no negative to stopping pollution. I mean, there might be a marginal increase in cost associated to the consumers through the corporation, but I mean, I would self-identify as a conservationist, right? The environment is just an inherent good, right? We shouldn't just go cut it down because it's useful. I just don't think that we need to use climate change as this all-encompassing, right? As this justification for literally every government action down the pipe. In order to say we should reduce pollution.
So reducing pollution can exist on its own merit.
That's right. We don't need to bring in the climate change for that.
Part of the problem with the way everyone talks about climate change is they focus so much on carbon dioxide as being like the ultimate bad emittant that causes global warming. The reason why carbon dioxide is an issue is because it has the longest half-life versus other contributors to global warming. But you still have things like SF6, you have a bunch of other pollutants which have a larger magnifying effect in terms of the greenhouse effect, which did not exist prior to industrialization, which is the reason why a lot of the indicts you've said of climate studies don't apply, because they just compare levels of CO2 now versus 2,000 years ago. And you won't see as much of a rise, but you do see other pollutants which have a greater magnifying effect, which are very bad in terms of heating of the planet or just climate change.
Okay, and I want to address, Alvin, I'm going to ask you, but I want to open it up for the whole panel as well. So beyond the regional issues that David brought up, what do we think on a global level again? Does it matter what we do here in the United States if China and India aren't willing to play a role in this? What do you think about that?
Well, we should have yeah, they might not be playing a role, but they're watching what we do. They watch everything really carefully, what we do. Maybe they don't do something right now, but if they see that we take a serious step forward for it, then they might be more willing to. Right now, yes, they might not be willing. Maybe even 10 years they might not. But maybe a century, maybe later on, maybe their children, maybe somebody else, they'll be going, oh wait, they took that first step. They were willing to do that first step when it wasn't politically viable, wasn't even true, and they took that first step. So yes, it might take them a while. We also remember that China and India are the fastest growing economy, so they want to satisfy their people. But as we know in China, like how high their pollution with Beijing, with the smog that you literally have to wear a mask, you can't go outside at certain times. They will know eventually they want to crack down on it, but they just don't see, if they don't see anybody else working on it, why should they work on it? When the U.S., the most powerful nation, does do it, why should they care?
I think your question has a very valid point to it, because it's definitely not cost effective in those countries to switch from coal, which is why China is building a coal plant every day, and India is consistently continuing with coal. So the bigger issue is finding a better way to kind of deal with coal and burn it. There's some technology that was put out by Ohio State University, which is clean coal CCS, I forget what the term S stands for. It's not typical clean coal technology. It's a type of clean coal technology that vaporizes, so you no longer have the soot and you don't have combustion, so you don't have.
So there's hope.
There's hope, but it's about making that cost effective.
All right.
Can I just interject here and say that I
You
think
have the final word on this one.
I would love for the administration of the United States to clear the way for new coal plants using the CCS technology. Like Nevada cannot build a new coal-fired plant, and that really limits our options with existing technology.
Okay.
So if we're serious about getting serious when it comes to pollution, the administration and the leadership in this country generally needs to start exploring those options.
All right, final word, Alex.
Well, I should say there are other reasons why coal is bad for the environment versus like oil, natural gas. The process by which you get coal in places like the Appalachian Mountains is literally by blowing the mountaintop off of the mountain, which is just terrible. And from a conservationist perspective, I think we can all agree that that's not good.
All right, Alex, we're going to take a quick break, but we are going to return to maybe a topic that might involve blowing up as well. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Change the skin they were born with and say they die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org.
Help support the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act, a bill that will help make sure women facing a mastectomy are told all their options about breast reconstruction. Visit broaddayusa.org for more information.
Welcome back from the break, and in the time remaining, I'd like to discuss UNLV's new addition to the Spring 2015 course catalog. Yes, the drone minor. It will be open to engineering undergraduates and include 3 core courses: system design, vehicle simulation and testing, and a law course to address privacy issues. Students will also take 4 specialized courses in either design, control communications, or human-computer interaction tracks. And as you may know, Nevada is one of 6 states authorized to test commercial drones. This program certainly addresses an educational need. So what do you guys think of this new program? Is it a good thing for UNLV? Open it up to you guys to discuss this.
I think it's probably a good thing. I mean, I think universities need to be more flexible and anticipate growth in new technology. My only concern is that the drone sector seems to be on the track to get out of control very quickly.
Okay.
In terms of privacy violations, domestic use. I mean, there are a lot of questions with its use outside of the country to place missile strikes, you know, the kind of collateral damage that goes along with it. So I think it's a mixed bag.
So do you think the educational opportunities are going to address some of those
issues? It's good for a UNLV student, right? I think that the opportunity to get an education in this before anyone else in the country can at the collegiate level is definitely a net positive for a UNLV student.
So it makes them more competitive.
Yeah, just my concern is what road does this lead us down?
That's like my biggest problem with the way the course is designed at UNLV is the fact that there's not an ethics course, an ethics of drone policy.
There's not ethics,
there's
but there's
course,
law and privacy issues, but not ethics. You're correct.
Law doesn't necessarily overlap with, I think, a lot of the issues that we're being spoken of before, like their use in privacy, their use abroad. I think that I largely disagree with the way it all went down. There wasn't really any dissent for developing the drones minor. It was so closely connected with the local military. It's just troubling to me when our university, instead of allowing like traditional like liberal arts to take precedent, allows the military to kind of dictate our curriculum in the way that militarizing education isn't always the best option in terms of having an education that is not biased one direction or the other, because it's driven towards exactly what our military needs and what they would like.
And David, I want to address you because you're a former State Department intern. What do you think about this minor? Is it good for UNLV? Does it make UNLV students more competitive in the market space?
Well, it's good for UNLV because if you look at we have a decent nuclear program here at UNLV, but we're lagging behind the other major universities that are good with nuclear technology, and that was because they were where all the national labs were during World War II. We have, this is a critical juncture, we have a chance to leap forward, especially because we have Creech Air Force Base where all the drones fly out of, for us to move forward and be a leader in drones, because that's the thing with technology, you don't uninvent technology. We have to move forward with this. And, Alex, you were saying, oh, there's no ethics to it. Well, if we're in an academic setting, we can actually talk about the ethics of it,
Not
and we
in
can
any of
actually.
the classes.
That we're outlining.
I think
It's
he
a
means it opens
prototype.
up
It's
the
a prototype
discussion.
program.
Yeah.
How can you talk? How can you discuss the ethics of it when there is no forum for it? Especially in an academic setting, where with an academia you can separate it from policy, and especially that's the point of tenured faculty, so they can speak their minds and speak their opinions. And so this is really good, and that we'll be able to push forward with this, and hopefully, to counteract what you said, Alex. Maybe down the road we'll be able to make a course on the ethics of it, and we'll be
Just a
able to
first
be a
step.
leader on that.
I think you got to get out in front of that. If the ethics course, or at least part of that law course, has got to talk about the different uses. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily military. I know UNLV's press release said that they use it to like monitor agricultural systems, conservation, forest fires. So there are some legitimate uses, I think, that go into this that could benefit the university and the students in the program. But I'm with Alex 100%. The drone capability just changes the game in terms of what the government has the ability to survey, when and how they have the ability to survey it. So there needs to be an ethics course so that people in the future may come out like Edward Snowden. And if they're asked to do something that's totally unethical,
Okay.
they don't allow it.
Alvin, final word from you. Is this a good thing for UNLV very quickly?
Yes, I think it's a good thing. I just also agree with what everybody else said about their ethics. Also, one thing though I brought up is the drone itself. What happened when it flies over and it loses power, loses signal, and crashes into a highway? Like what we'll do then. Also,
Okay.
security.
Well, maybe this educational approach will help satisfy some of those concerns that I think we may all have. But that is all the time we have today. So now you know what we think. Let us know what you think. Share your opinions or any ideas or topics you'd like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at unlv.tv. And for all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.